Hello, friends and lovers of audio. I am your host, Brian Hunter, and you have reached the Occasional Podcast, Season 9, Episode 9. As we find ourselves slowly winding down from another spring audiophile season, we come upon ourselves a time to reflect, a time to think about all of the great audio products that came out this year, all of the big news, all of the great sounds, and all of the ways we've kind of internalized and thought about audio, high fidelity, and how we are continually searching for our own sense of what we want and how we want to get there. I know I've done it. I hope you've enjoyed yourself on the same path. And now we just have one more audio show to kind of let you know what went down, how things happened, what sounded good, great. And with the help of Marc Phillips, editor-in-chief at PTA, we'll cover all the highlights from the most recent show up in Seattle. But first, a few orders of business. If you'd like to help support the Part-Time Audiophile Network and this podcast, make sure to check out all of our sponsors that sponsor this show. That's greatly appreciated. And don't forget to check out our new sponsored merch, which is a record weight for this season. It's 800 grams of solid bronze. It's amazing, and you can find it on the parttimeaudiophile.com website in the top navigation bar. You click on record weight, and it will take you to the store. Again, thank you guys for listening. The next few episodes will be a bit of a shift of gears into something a little different, but we have some really great interviews coming up that I can't wait for you to hear. But first, the Pacific Audiofest from Seattle, just held a few weeks back. Marc Phillips of Part-Time Audiophile gives us the scoop. On with the show. Here we go. Our friends at ZMF Headphones are sponsors of today's episode. ZMF is a curated collection of various sounds and styles in the form of dynamic and planar magnetic wood headphones, designed by founder Zach Merbach since 2011. ZMF has garnered an A+ recommended component in Stereophile, Headphone of the Year on Headphonics.com, and been a 2-time winner of the SBAF Golden Schlong Award. ZMF Headphones. That's the letter ZMF HEADPHONES.com. ZMF Headphones is the place to go to check out ZMF's collection and learn more. ZMF, traditional craft and modern acoustics. Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is sponsored by Acora Acoustics, maker of high-end natural stone speakers. Acora Acoustics' goal is simple: engineer speakers that bring your music to life and bring the family together. Their loudspeakers are handcrafted to let pure sound take the stage, directly connecting you to the heart of your music and all its natural colors and vibrancy, while fitting exquisitely into your existing decor. Acora uses only the finest drivers, crossover components, wiring, binding posts, damping materials, and screws. Each component is handpicked and screened for quality, first through meticulous measurement, and then by thousands of hours of extensive listening. They know that when it comes to audio performance, nothing short of spectacular will do. See more at AcoraAcoustics.com. That's AcoraAcoustics.com. And Bonsai! Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us, as I say all the time. But thank you for joining us. I'm here with Marc Phillips, the part-time audiophile extraordinaire, the Mr. Editor-in-Chief, and the man of many roads, who goes to many audio shows. But guess what? This time the drive was not quite as far, I don't think, for you, Marc. How was the drive over to Pacific Audiofest, somewhere up in your corner of the U.S.?
It was 165 miles from my house to the venue. It was a 3-hour drive. And it's a beautiful drive because it's nothing but, pine trees the whole way and a few big mountains. Being in Oregon, I was on the East Coast, and it was surprising how many of these shows I could drive to. I could drive to both Capitol Audio Fest and Expona from where I lived in Rochester, and it would only be less than a day's drive. Here, it's only 3 hours. It's the only show I get to do like this anymore. I spend a lot of time on planes, but it's a glamorous life. Planes, trains, and automobiles.
And it's a relatively new show, right? This is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like been one or two of these guys, right?
This is the second one. They tried to get it going before COVID hit. So, and then every year they kept kind of planning to do it, and then it kept getting canceled. And then finally last year was the first year of this. It's a good show. It's a real good show. Even better this year. There are probably a few kind of bugs to work out the first year of any show. Real minor stuff. It seems like everything went smoothly on their end. On the show's end, it was a well-run, fun show. Everybody had a blast. The downside would only be the fact that it was a show on the small side. And so it was easier to cover. But then, I just came off of Munich and Expona, which were huge monster shows that killed me. And so Seattle was a chance to relax and spend some real time in the rooms. Everybody there just seemed to be in a great mood. And so it had a lot of the spirit that we used to see at Rocky Mountain, where it's just real family, real fun, people there to relax and enjoy themselves rather than business. And so this year, the mood there was fantastic.
Yeah, just coming off of the show down here, which I attended, I take a lot of the same sentiment. It wasn't exactly the largest show ever. However, the vibe, the people, they're just still excited to be back in it. We had a little bit of an uptick last year after COVID, and this year, I just feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, would you say that people kind of feel like it's back? They're saying, oh, we had to go away because of this pandemic thing, but now we're kind of back and we're ready to party?
I think we felt that in Expona. So at Expona was so huge, and it exceeded everybody's expectations for how big it was. That was the kind of the sentiment across the industry was, we're back, everything is chugging along, business is good, blah, blah, blah. And so you're right. And even on smaller shows like Pacific Audiofest, it's still a pleasure to do them because from the show attendees' point of view, it is what it is, but there's a lot of people running around behind the scenes trying to get stuff done, and it's a pleasure to these smaller shows where we can really focus on the job at hand, the gear and the music.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Woo Audio. The Woo Audio WA23 Luna headphone amplifier is engineered to deliver an impressive sound experience with an ingenious design that is not the typical audio gear black box. The amplifier is an all-tube, pure analog circuit, operating in Class A mode for a powerful, balanced sound, outstanding stereo separation, and a wide bandwidth across all frequencies, so you hear every note in the recording. No matter what music you enjoy, WA23 Luna delivers Woo Audio's commitment to a natural sound that is non-fatiguing for all-day listening. Learn more at wooaudio.com. That's WOOAUDIO.com, where better sound begins. Today's episode is also sponsored by Shit Audio. Shit Audio designs and builds audio components in California and Texas. Based in Valencia and Corpus Christi, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit shit.com or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. So I want to start with some non-audiophile questions for you before we dig into all the sounds of the thing. Did you hear a particular track any more than any other? Was there a standout track that you heard like all weekend? And was it Chocolate Trip yet?
Chocolate Chip Trip was played.
We're trying to start a movement, people. A movement.
Oh, I've been talking about coming up with a different one because everybody's starting to do it. Like I said, I hear it all over shows now. You know, I walk into rooms and it just starts playing, you know, like it's my theme song, which it pretty much is at this point. And so I was thinking about coming up with a second kind of off-the-wall thing that I haven't decided on yet, but there may be a new test. We were thinking of Buena by Morphine. Might be the new one, if you know that song.
It's funny you say that because, believe it or not, if you check out and this is a little plug, Mark and I's coverage on our Facebook Reels channel, okay, everyone? Mark shot a ton of Pacific Audiofest.
I did.
Coverage. So you can't see anything here. You can just hear us. But if you want to see what Mark saw, eye to eye, camera to speaker, go to either the Facebook Reels channel or the TikTok channel, believe it or not. We are hanging out with the kids in the TikTok channel, and that would be Part-Time Audiophiles Facebook page, Part-Time Audiophile also on the TikTok. So we'll be posting that in the next couple of days, and it should be all up by the time you hear that.
I will tell you very quickly that on a number of these videos, Chocolate Chip Trip is being played.
The spatial cues are pretty cool.
The the way it wraps around the dynamics. People think it's gimmickry. It's like, no, it's this huge guy with really long arms who has incredible reach. Well, you hear how crazy the recording sound. He's like, oh, how many overdubs is that? And then you watch him do it live. He does exactly the same thing live, and it sounds the same. So, no, it's the dude, Danny Carey.
And we are, of course, talking about the prog rock legend, Danny Carey.
Danny Carey, Tool.
From Tool.
Yeah.
Just want to get that out there. How about Stevie Ray? Did they have a lot of Stevie Ray?
No. Stevie Ray, I heard it once, I think, at like Expo or something, and said, oh, haven't heard this in a few years. So I think Tin Pan Alley has run its course.
To say the least. Get a little long in the tooth, if you ask me.
Because there's a couple songs that people play all the time. I'll give you a complaint of mine, is the fact that they keep playing songs with male vocals that are whatever's right. Is it bass that's right below baritone?
Mm-hmm.
These guys who come in here and sing like this. And I'm so sick of this music. And it's kind of a mix of Leonard Cohen and Johnny Cash and all these things. But it's like all these other people are coming in, and it's just like this really low grumbly voice. I mean, people like the bass, I guess, but I always think it sounds heavily processed, and I'm not digging it. I think the one song that everybody keeps playing that I really dislike is Chris Jones' No Sanctuary.
Yes.
I hate that song.
I think we talked about that a little bit on the last one, too, where it's like getting on my nerves. But I appreciate the music. I'm not dogging it. It's better than anything I've ever made, so there is that.
Well, at least they're not playing Diana Krall endlessly anymore.
Before we jump over the rooms, I will comment one more thing on that. I feel like years ago, Diana Krall was like non-stop, and to be honest, I don't hear her at all anymore. And I saw her in concert, believe it or not.
I've seen her in concert too, and it was never anything about her per se that I disliked. It was always about the audiophiles who would come in and they would just ask for that and only that. Like it was the only thing they listened to, and it gets really boring after a while. I know there's a couple of songs out there. There were songs like, oh god, this song again. I usually don't pay attention to them because I'm not looking for them on Qobuz. I'm avoiding them.
Yeah, sometimes I just kind of spin through the rooms. It's like I hear them, and I guess when it's a really short listen, I appreciate it more because I'll get a snapshot of what that thing sounds like if I'm breezing through. I don't dislike it. It's when I have the time to invest and sit, and then I'm like, okay, got an idea of what this thing sounds like through the traditional track. Now let me play my music. But
here, I will say one last thing really quick about the music is that I think there is a concerted effort for these people in the industry to play music people actually listen to in their houses. That's a kind of a new thing that I'm seeing more and more people
really
getting into this. Yeah, they're not doing the same audiophile tracks. In fact, it's almost like when you play some audiophile chestnut, the room will groan. You will start to hear people groan like, oh, they're going to play this song and everything. I was hearing a lot of new music. I was in the JMF Idion audio room with Michael Vamos of Audio Skies, and his playlist was one cool song after another. of people I'd never heard of before. So, I mean, it just kind of goes to show there's just all this music out there to find. So I need to hang with that guy and listen to some more of his playlists.
Well, I think what the atmosphere has done essentially is that there are people who play the traditional tracks, and then there are people who are purposefully not playing traditional tracks.
Exactly.
So it's what it is in a way is it's unfortunately polarizing. So you don't get anything in the middle of the road. You either got people who play it or people who refuse to play it, and they're playing something, like you said, obscure or unexpected. And in a way, if you're just a regular old Joe walking through, you get kind of the short end of the stick because you either get this one thing or you get the opposite of it. You don't get like this middle of the road that you would maybe meet your expectations or not. But again, super diverse musical taste at an audiophile show. So there's a lot of people. There is no middle of the road, technically speaking. But as much as the next guy, I'd love to have some new music that's really good injected into my consciousness. So I'm all for new tracks and new things and fun things. And I'm sure you guys are as well. I love it when I find a song that's really good that also sounds really fantastic. And those are the tracks like we talk about with Chocolate Chip Trip here,
right?
Where we like that cross section, that crossroads, and those are the songs that I kind of bring to people, share with people, and put out on our news stream. So just something to think about. Any track like that came along your path this time, you think our listeners might want to check out?
The stuff I listen to at home isn't necessarily the stuff that they're playing. There's no overlap, I think, of what I'm hearing at shows and what I hear at home. I could get people to play Yulunga from Dead Can Dance, which is another, test track of mine. That pops up at shows, and it sounds absolutely incredible. I'll tell you one thing is the new Steely Dan reissues that are coming out, that those are starting to get played, Can't Buy a Thrill. And
is Asia on that?
They haven't got to Asia. They started at the beginning. But anyways, they're getting there. They're going to get there, and they're going in chronological order. So Asia will be coming, I think, toward the end of the year. And then Gaucho will come after that. They've already done like the second wind of them, Two Against Nature and that stuff. They've already done that. But now they're going back to the classic stuff. If you're a Steely Dan fan, I'm going to tell you the young people are totally into Steely Dan now. It's like everybody in the world is rediscovering these guys. So if you're going to say one kind of music that you're going to hear that you really want to hear at a show, Steely Dan's a pretty good choice.
That's very interesting.
These new reissues sound amazing, and everybody's like going, can't wait for Asia.
Well, that's why I brought it up. It's like the Abraxas.
It's their magnum opus, I would say. And most people put Gaucho up there like second place. So it depends when you were introduced to them, whether you were there for Do It Again or whether you were there for Hey 19 or whatever else came afterwards.
Well, I wasn't there for any of them, Mark. I'm not that old. Sorry.
I was. My older brother was a big fan of them from the very beginning. So I was listening to the stuff when it came out.
I want to see when the first one came out. Let's see.
First Steely Dan album, 72 or 73, I would imagine.
Wow, this is all before I was born. The song that I think of, well, I guess they got a lot. Reeling in the Years, Deacon Blues.
Deacon Blues, my favorite Steely Dan song, is because it's so melancholy.
But the one that I hear the most, because my wife loves the song, Peg. Peg.
Oh, Peg.
We come back to you. She loves that
Peg's
song.
a good one. I'll tell you, two of the older albums, my two favorites are, of course, Do It Again. Do It Again is just a jam. It's so hypnotic, and you really get into it. I love listening to Do It Again. And then Ricky, Don't Lose That Number is a really great sounding track.
I'm glad that sounds good, because that's a funny track to me. It's almost like...
Oh, but it sounds great. It's a really cool sounding track.
So... enough distractions. Let's get down to the meat and potatoes. I'm going to make that a phrase now.
Let's talk about the Pacific Audiofest, which everybody wants to call the Seattle Audiofest. People kept correcting themselves at the show, but...
What do you think sounds better, PAF or SAF?
SAF, nothing wrong with SAF.
Seattle Audiofest would be SAF.
Well, SAF sounds better than PAF. This year at SAF instead of this year at PAF.
Did the show have any big rooms? Was it like how many big rooms did it have, and then did it move on to like towers after that?
The tower, there was only one floor, the 13th, the penthouse, is the only one that was up in the tower. The rest of it was all in the conference rooms, meeting rooms, and all that. So there were a lot of big rooms. You had the usual. You had von Schweikert with VAC, Audio Group Denmark debuting the Borison M6s for $550,000 a pair. And so
wait, the new ones, the new Borisons,
the Borisons that were at at Munich, they were static. Expoda, we heard the M3s, which are $280,000. Then I went to Munich, and they had a static display of the M6s. And here at PAF, they actually were playing the M6s, and they're $550,000 a pair. And that was a huge room, of course. Cora Acoustics put their big giant Wampin speakers in one of the smaller rooms upstairs, though, which was kind of
interesting. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about why it was interesting, but one of the things was it sounded just like it was in a big room. So it's like a speaker that's impervious to its surroundings. It sounds the same no matter where you put them. And so that was a really exciting kind of development. JMF is getting bigger and bigger. Oh, the biggest room would be Genesis Advanced Technologies, because Gary Ko was debuting at the same time both his biggest speakers ever, the Primes, also introducing his new entry level called G7, which are just kind of floor standing two-ways and such that I'm really into. And
wait, so hold on. The Primes that you mentioned are giant line arrays. What is the arrangement in the two-way? What's the drivers in there?
Each of the G7s had a rear-firing tweeter as well. And so that kind of gave it the more space behind it. So
was it ribbon or soft dome?
It was a dome. I didn't reach. I didn't.
I think you did push it in like a button.
No,
Mark.
I did not. I did not. You're dredging up old nightmares of my toddler sons pushing in the silk domes every time they'd walk past the speaker. Mostly wood finishes. Just the box, the floor standing box, and they sounded really good. And these were still prototypes, but the smallest one is going to start at about $8,000 a pair, which is a really low price for the quality that you're going to getting.
Now, where do you stand on rear-firing tweeters when it comes to floor-standing speaker design? Do you like it? Do you find it whatever? Does it add something? And if it adds something, what is it that it adds?
Well, a good example of that rear-firing tweeter is the von Schweikert speakers. So they have rear-firing tweeters. I reviewed the ESEs maybe 3 years ago. They have a rear-firing tweeter that has an ambient control that it adjusts. So it's a tuning device that allows you to kind of customize the speaker to your room a little bit more. But it does, and generally when you turn it up, it adds a lot of air. So you get that additional air and spaciousness. So if you're in a small place, a rear-firing tweeter can be a really good way to get a bigger sound, bigger, more precise imaging. But of course, the only thing is when you have speakers with rear-firing drivers or ports, you need to have some space on the back wall, or else it's not going to work at all. And so if you can pull them out from the wall 2-3 feet minimum, a rear-firing tweeter is going to do some really interesting things to the sound. It's going to really open it up. So yeah, I'm going to say I like rear-firing tweeters as a general rule.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so anything else from that room that was noteworthy? Because they, like you said, it was big. They had two.
Well, they had two systems, and they had the big system with everything. They had Merrill audio amplification. They were playing reel to reel. And so on the other side of the room they were playing a smaller system with the G7 speakers. But my good friend Bob Clark of Profundo got involved and brought the WAN turntable, the new one, the 14.5, which has got a double layer plinth now. And with the new tone arms, Heat Audio, which I'm a big fan of. I love every brand that Bob sells, I love. But Heat Audio, the Goldenberg cartridges, which is one of the guys who was at EMT, branched off and is doing his own cartridges. He had those on there. That was a really nice system. I really dug that system a lot. You go over to hear the big system of with the big Genesis, and it's like, yeah, it's impressive. Gary Ko likes to record performances live at the shows and then play them for everybody the next day, recording them to reel. And so that's always a pleasure. It sounds really sharp and live and precise, and it's really good. But that smaller system is that's the kind of system I like to have in my home, because I couldn't drag those primes around. Jeez. They were touching the ceiling, yeah. Almost. They're huge monster speakers.
Where do you stand on line array speakers? Do you like the vibe? It's definitely a different alignment, a different kind of system setup than most.
I'm a two-way guy, and you're a two-way guy because you like the idea of a point source, and you like the idea of coherency between the drivers and a crossover that is minimal in design. And so that's the sound I go to. So that said, I've been listening to the NOLA speakers a lot, and they tend to have 15, 20 drivers per side. The Borisons, which I adore, they're 4.5 ways or whatever. So big arrays, generally, I don't usually gravitate toward them, but I certainly don't have anything against them. I think it just depends on the design. You know, I've heard array speakers that sound good.
All right. So what else on the big room side of things?
Okay, so JMF, I've been giving a lot of coverage to JMF, which is a French amplifier brand. And I just, ever since I started listening to them last year at Expona, I was listening to a system that I really enjoyed, and there was a lot of good brands involved. But it was one of those rare times that I said to myself, what I'm liking about the system the most is what the amplifiers are bringing to the equation. And it just seems like this is solid state gear. It's expensive. People balk at the prices until you realize what goes on inside. And so now the last couple of shows, they've brought clear top units so you can see the level of workmanship inside. Thick golden PC boards that require a special solder that they invented in order to make everything stick. It's just the level of detail, every single thing they do, it just adds to the final product. So every time I hear a system with JMF, I'm just like, wow, I really dig this system. They played with Idion Audio Digital, which is superb stuff. And the Gamut speakers, the Gamut Zodiac speakers, which are, I think they cost just shy of $200,000 a pair. But I haven't heard big Gamuts in a while. I heard them 15, 20 years ago and said, wow, these are really incredible. And then it seemed like I didn't hear any Gamuts after that for a long time. Well, these Zodiacs are similar to those speakers. They're huge, beautifully made. In conversations that we're having about the big speakers from the big speaker companies and the King of the Mountain and stuff, these Gamuts deserve to be in the conversation. They're really good. That was an awesome room as well. There's Acora did their VRC ones one more time. They're 400-pound grand speakers, $218,000, just massive and everything. They hit it out of the park. That's what I said the first time I heard them. Acora really hit them out of the park. And Acora is really interesting at this point in time because they just bought Audio Research. And so, of course, there was a bunch of Audio Research in the room as well. And then it was actually the Inuos room. Like Greg Weaver went there and did his little show where he plays all his favorite albums and stuff. And Inuos is one of my favorite digital companies because every time when they run a room, when it's an Inuos room, they always assemble really good systems from different brands that are just amazing. And then they usually do some sort of A/B comparison because they have the system in place that'll show you the differences. So that room, once again, I think the VRC ones, I've Valcora this many times, Chocolate Chip Trip Kings. They really just, wow, they just really knock it out of the park, like I said. So that was an awesome room. We have I don't want to say the usual, but it's Von Schweikert Audio had the Ultra 7s, and VAC was in the room with not the biggest, but big amplifiers, and the 300 IQs. And I've been listening to the system for years, and it's just an exceptional system. It's one of the finest systems I've ever heard in my life. And they just never seem to falter away from this. It just, time after time, I go in there, and I really enjoy my time there, and I have a lot of fun. And so this year, the big news, though, is on the VAC side is that Kevin Hayes is introducing these new smaller amps called the Essence series. And it's a pair of small monoblocks, a matching, like, half-width chassis preamplifier. They have this, like, black sparkly finish that kind of matched the Koetsu Urushi black I've been using, and it's just the Koetsu Urushi black that I have. It's black lacquer, but it's got gold flakes sprinkled through it, so it's that kind of look. He was playing in 2 rooms. Forget how much. I think he said the monoblocks are around $8,000 a piece. The preamp is probably around $8,000, and for VAC it gets pretty expensive up there, but this stuff sounded great, and it is affordable. So I think this is going to be, that's one of the biggest stories of the show is the VAC Essence line. So I went and listened to the NOLA room, which was the same baby reference grand gold 3s. That's their new $150,000 pair speakers. A few months ago, I went to Baltimore to Dr. Vinyl's to spend a weekend with these speakers. They're very impressive. And these speakers were all being run by the VAC Essence. So that was my chance to see, with a $150,000 speaker, they did a really good job. Amazing soundstage depth, big sound in the room. That was a really nice room as well. I got to spend time with Carl and Marilyn Marchesotto, and they're just great people. They're just legends in the industry. So it's always fun to just kind of relax and talk to them. They're very nice people. Okay, so the big surprise.
I love surprises.
There's two big surprises, actually. Okay, number one, it's really easy to talk about Cabas. Cabas speakers, you've probably seen them, the spherical speakers. They always got like really strange drivers. And they had a pair. I walked into the room. It's called the Cabas Rialto. It's a system. So walk into this room, and there's a pair of really tiny, really gorgeous but tiny monitors in the room, concentric drivers, just sitting there making incredible music. Just two speakers in stand. The guy's in the back with his phone or something, and he's just, I don't even know what system's running. And it turns out these are not only active speakers, but they have room correction, they have DACs in them, and they almost have the name has the little disc on top, the control touchscreen thing. They have one of those as well. And so the whole system is $4,000, $39.95 for the entire system. And I sat and I said, you know what? I don't spend enough time like hanging out and figuring out these systems and figuring out what they're about. I walked in there and sat down, and it wasn't like, oh, this is pretty nice sound for a little system like this. It was like any other system that was at the show that had pretenses toward ultra high end. It was an amazing sound. And I think these things, once people start to get a chance to listen to them, they're going to start buying them because it's really, for $4,000, it's amazing. That was a big surprise. Seems like it's been a long time since I've sat down and listened to Cabas. And the other one were two brands that are brand new. This was their first show. And one is called Songer Audio. I had to kind of tell everybody so that I got confused at first, and I thought it was a typo for Sonor Audio,
that's what I thought too when you just said that.
They do field coil speakers, and they're single full range drivers with whizzer cones, high efficiency. Big, beautiful wooden cabin. It's really gorgeous stuff. And they were being run by this massive 2A3 amp that just looked like something out of a museum. Really old looking, but really cool looking. And it's called Whammerdyne. And they're 2A3 amplifiers. And the Songer Audio speakers, I mean, there's a lot of work goes into them. They're really beautiful, the woodwork, and they're made out of brass. And there were two models. One was about $37,000, one was about $42,000. So they were expensive speakers. But this Whammerdyne 2A3 amplifier, 4.2 watts per channel, and they start at like $6,000. They're 2A3 amps, and I'm like, is that a typo? Is that for the power? Is that the external power supply? Supply? And it's like, no. And that's the thing about 2A3 amps are usually pretty simple designs and simple circuitry. The execution, the look of it is just absolutely gorgeous. And I got these guys to play Chocolate Chip Trip on 4.2 watts per channel, and while it didn't quite rock the room, it sounded really good. All the textures were there. One of the few rooms I had to go back to and listen to again just to make sure I loved it. It's that old-fashioned, that SET, low-powered amplifier, high-efficiency speaker kind of thing going on. And I used to be really into it. And you listen to the system, and it reminds you why. Yeah. It's like I missed that sound. And they're local in Portland, so I definitely want to get that system reviewed as soon as I can because it really did make me look at everything with a different perspective. It was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful sound. I do have a favorite room that I've been leaving off. So.
Ooh, we're there, folks. Where's the drum roll? Hold on. Folks, we have sound effects.
Ta-da!
And the winner is...
the $550,000 a pair Borison M6s. Ta-da!
Oh, this was a long one. Mark, it's a standing ovation for you.
Please sit down. Please sit down.
We have a show to do. I appreciate it, but come on.
Yeah, come on, guys. Sit down. So here we go. So, Borison M3s, $280,000. And I'm really trying to get out of talking about prices all the time, but that's the first thing people want to know. But the M3s were the best sound at Expona this year in a very competitive field, but they were... And so the M6s, which are twice as big, but in Munich, I was treated to the rare pleasure of the title for Bugatti system, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
And so I've gotten to the point where I'm starting to hear this really lofty, crazy stuff that it's going to be impossible for me to pick one or the other because it's always going to be about personal preferences at this level. I mean, the title system, $450,000 complete, and this system was $550,000 just for the speakers. In fact, they used all their top of the line stuff, the stuff from the 880 line, all really expensive. They're the best cables, the best, the power distribution and the Ethernet switches and the streamers and all that. And it was well over a $1 million system. Yet it didn't look like a $1 million system. You had to know what each part of it was. So it kind of looked like a normal size system on a double wide rack. But this was, again, I joke about the fact that, okay, you got the M6, is next year going to be the M12, and it's going to keep going. And their attitude is, it might. We're just going to keep going. And so does it get crazy? Yes, it gets crazy to talk about a $550,000 a pair of speakers. By the way, that's not the most expensive speaker out there. We have Dart Seal just announced a $1 million phono cartridge. So
what? You got to be kidding me! $1 million photo cartridge?
$1 million. It's like 1,000,001 or something crazy. But what you get, you buy this cartridge, this guy, and he services it for a lifetime service on it. He'll come and he'll set it up. He'll come and he'll, after a certain amount of time, and check to make sure it's it's properly aligned, and just do whatever he can. So, who knows who's going to buy it. It was a crazy thing. It just came out in the news. But we're talking about $550,000 for a pair of speakers. But the wonderful thing that Audio Group Denmark is doing, which is this is Borison speakers, and it's Avic amplifiers, and it's ANSA's cabling and accessories. And now it's something called Access, and Access is their entry-level line. So all the stuff that they've developed and has such a high cost because of the rare expensive materials that are used to produce this kind of sound, it's trickling down into an entry-level line. And we're talking about, it's called the Forte 1, and there's the Forte 1, Forte 2, Forte 3. The Forte 1 is a integrated amplifier, DAC, and streamer all in one for $5,500. And then they have the X3 speakers, which are tall floor standing Borison speakers, the X3s, and they're $12,000. And so you spend $12,000 and plus $5,500, and then whatever the cables cost that you decide to do. So you can get it under $20,000. And that sound is absolutely incredible. But when you sit in front of the Borison M6s, the Borison M3s were amazing, and they sounded limitless, and they sound like they could do anything. The M6s sounded like that, except it was like somebody came up and kicked the back wall, and it fell backwards like a cheap backdrop to a movie. And all of a sudden, there was like giant fields and plains in front of you. Mm-hmm. It was everything the M3s are, but expanded in every direction into impossibly large directions, and it had control over everything. And it was such a quiet system. The noise floor is so low on these systems that it's scary. You start hearing your heart beating and strange stuff. It was Mohammed Samji was their first time really sitting down listening to this stuff, and he was blown away. And this is a guy who runs big system with all sorts of big famous brands. And I think we've got him just questioning everything he thought he knew, just like I did the first time I heard this stuff. So the best sound of the show is definitely Audio Group Denmark and the Borison M6 speakers.
Booyah.
Booyah. That's it.
You've been to a lot of shows this year.
You and I
both.
Yeah.
What is your kind of takeaway about this show in the overall landscape of all the shows you saw?
First of all, like I said, it's the last show for a few months, and it was small and it was relaxing and it was super fun. And I think we all need to do shows like that. And I think that as consumers and audiophiles need to go to the show and have fun. It's a fun show. And it was just kind of a great breezy way to get out of the season. I mean, like I said, Axpona was so big that it was physically difficult to cover it. Munich's always, especially because I usually do it by myself, but Munich is a challenge in its own way. They were big shows that wore me out. This was a show where I just had a great time, hung out with my industry friends, and listened to a lot of rooms. And if I liked the sound of a room, I could go back and hang out for a little bit longer afterwards. So that was the big thing. But I'll tell you, I've got two tiny complaints, and they're kind of trends that are going at the shows. And this is not reflective of this show. This is just in general. This is actually the exhibitors. is that there were 2 rooms at this show. First one was so dark, no lights were on in the room. So I couldn't get a decent photograph, even though we were taking the lamps and trying to shine it. It's like you couldn't see the face of the speakers no matter what you did. And I'm thinking, I know you're trying to create this sexy, relaxed mood in there, but they can't see what you're selling. So it's stupid. So then I went into a second room, and that room was so dark that I started worrying about trip hazards and OSHA. Was it OSHA compliant? And I walked into a room, it was pitch black, and the only thing I could see in the room were the lights from the equipment. Just the little LEDs here and there. You can make your rooms dark and sexy and sultry, and you could do all that, but you have to realize that we have to see. It's like going to a restaurant, and it's so dark in there you can't see your plate of food. There are enough lighting solutions out there to do what you want to do,
yes,
but so that other people can see what you're doing. The little lights that get placed on the floor, they're a solution to this problem. And so everybody's using, it's just a little disc, they're battery operated, and you just stick them on the floor in front of it and it lights up the room. I have tripped over so many of those things, and now I'm seeing all the show attendees, they're tripping over the things. So while it's certainly, the second problem is certainly a solution for the first problem, there has to be something else with the lighting. It's like, I think we just need to think about our room lighting. It's a lot different. It's a lot better than when I used to be an exhibitor, because we always had problems. But you guys are trying to make these dark rooms, and it's just, I think it's a bad idea. I think you need to sell product, and I think there needs to be lights on those products. I saw it a lot in Munich too, the same thing, where it's just like, guys, come on, I can't see shit in here. So that's just a mild grumbling, but other than that, no. Love this show. Gary Gill and Lou Hinckley are just busting their asses to put on another great show. And next year, they're going to start doing one in Dallas, Texas. So that was a good note. So now it'll be, I think, in March, which is a tricky time because that's when South by Southwest is. But this is Dallas, not Austin, so it might work out. But they're doing a good job. I'm looking forward to doing Capital Audiofest, which is in November, my next show, not till November. But it's Gary and Lou do that show too. And so they're friendly, they're relaxed shows where everybody, they feel like family. And everybody's having a good time. So those shows, if you want to go to a show, you want to meet all the people in the industry in a relaxed atmosphere and chat with them when it's not so business-like, go to Seattle, and go to Capital Audiofest, and just keep going to the smaller shows in general.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on and giving us the update, brother. Safe travels for the rest of the year, but hopefully you get to just hang out a little bit and listen to some good gear. Thanks.
Right.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes parttimeaudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA newsletter, and audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. The Occasional Podcast and its original associated music is monitored, mixed, and mastered on the Focal Trio 6 BE studio monitors. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.